All right. Language learning fanatics. You ready for another deep dive?
Let's go.
You know how some people seem to soak up languages like magic?
Right, like they just watch a couple movies.
Exactly, and suddenly they're fluent.
Yeah.
We're gonna totally unpack that idea today.
Okay.
See if it's actually possible to just pick up a language by, listening and reading.
Interesting.
We've got some really cool research to dig into for this one.
Yeah, we're not just talking about those inspiring stories.
Right.
That, you
It's
know.
those polyglots who effortlessly learn a million languages.
Yeah, it's more than that.
We're going deeper.
Yeah.
We're diving into excerpts from this text that breaks down all these different theories
Okay.
about language acquisition
I like
and how we learn languages.
Mm-hmm.
And trust me, this is way more interesting than a high school textbook.
Really gets to the core of how our brains handle new languages.
Totally. So let's start with a big name in the field,
Okay.
Stephen Krashen, and his input hypothesis. Have you heard of this?
Oh, yeah, it's kind of a big deal.
Okay, good. So for anyone who's not familiar, what's the deal with this whole input hypothesis thing?
Well, the gist is that to really learn a language, you need to be exposed to what we call comprehensible input.
Okay, comprehensible input.
Yeah, basically it means understanding messages in the language you're learning.
Okay.
Not just words here and there, but actual messages that you can grasp.
Gotcha. So full sentences and
Exactly. Sentences,
Yeah.
paragraphs,
Yeah.
stories, conversations, the whole shebang.
Okay, I'm with you. So how does this actually play out in real life?
Well, picture this. You're a kid in a primary school,
Okay.
like in a French-speaking part of Canada.
All right.
You walk into your English class,
Mm-hmm.
and it looks more like a library than a classroom.
Whoa, hold on. A classroom full of distractions.
That's the point.
Oh, okay.
The distractions are the key.
And so
In textbooks and drills,
Yeah.
you're surrounded by English books and audio cassettes. You get to choose what you want to dive into.
Oh, cool.
There's no pressure to speak before you're ready.
Okay.
The focus is all on getting immersed in English,
Mm-hmm.
listening and reading for pure enjoyment.
Yeah.
No stressful exams.
Wow.
Just a relaxed, fun environment.
That's so different from the language classes that most of us are used to.
Right.
That sounds almost too good to be true.
It did raise some eyebrows.
Yeah, I bet that caused some serious debates in the education world.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
It was a pretty controversial approach.
So the big question is, did it work?
Right. Can you actually learn a language just by chilling with books and tapes?
Yeah, that sounds amazing, but does it actually work?
Let's find out.
So those Canadian kids in the language lab classroom, did they actually learn English?
Right. It does sound almost too good to be true. But the research is pretty compelling.
Okay.
So those kids we talked about who were just chilling with books and tapes,
Uh-huh.
they studied English this way for 2 years.
Oh, okay.
And get this,
Okay.
they performed just as well as then, and sometimes even better than,
Wow.
students in traditional programs.
No way.
Yeah,
Yeah,
no.
even though they weren't doing all the grammar drills
Yeah.
and memorizing verb conjugations and stuff.
It really challenges our assumptions about language learning.
Yeah, totally.
Like,
So hold on, this works for kids, but what about adults like us?
right.
Our brains are a little bit less sponge-like, aren't they?
Well, you might be surprised.
Okay.
The text also mentions a study with adult immigrants
Okay.
learning English.
Mm-hmm.
These are adults with jobs, families,
Yeah.
real lives.
Right.
They weren't in a special language lab.
Yeah.
They just chose to read simplified English books in their free time.
Okay, so they were motivated,
Well-
but were they fluent after a week?
Well, maybe not fluent,
Okay.
but even after just 6 weeks, their vocabulary had grown significantly.
That's pretty impressive.
And here's the really interesting part.
Yeah.
They found a direct link between how much people read and how much their vocabulary grew.
So it's a direct correlation.
Pretty much the more you read, the more words you learn.
That's awesome.
It's encouraging, right?
Yeah, totally.
You don't have to be a grammar whiz to start learning.
Exactly.
Just find something you enjoy reading, even if it's simple,
Right.
and dive in.
I like it.
It's all about exposure.
Totally. Now, I've always been curious about this other method.
Yeah.
It's mentioned in the text. It's
Yeah.
called total physical response, or TPR.
Oh, yeah, TPR.
Have you heard of this?
It's a classic.
Okay, so what's the deal with that?
Well, it's especially effective for beginners
Okay.
because it connects physical action with understanding.
Oh, that's interesting.
Like when you were a kid,
Yeah.
you learned your first language through movement and interaction.
Right, not grammar rules.
Exactly.
So you learn by doing.
Precisely with TPR, you respond physically to commands in the language.
Okay.
Like stand up, sit down, walk to the door.
Interesting.
You're not speaking yet,
Mm-hmm.
but you're actively processing the language.
So you're like building a foundation
Exactly.
before you even start speaking.
It can really take the pressure off for beginners.
That makes sense because a lot of people are afraid to make mistakes.
Right. TPR is a gentler approach.
I like it.
More active, more engaging.
This is all super fascinating.
Yeah.
But is it really this simple?
What do you mean?
Like, is understanding a language really all it takes to be fluent?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
Yeah.
And as with most things in life,
Uh-oh.
it's not quite that simple.
Okay, so there's more to the story.
There's always more to the story.
All right, well, let's unpack that then. So there's more to fluency than just understanding.
It's not quite as simple as just absorbing everything like a sponge.
Right.
You know, you can understand every word in a song,
Right.
but that doesn't mean you can sing it perfectly yourself.
True.
There's a difference between passive understanding
Mm-hmm.
and active, accurate production.
That makes sense. So what are we missing then?
Well, one crucial piece is something called negative evidence.
Negative evidence?
Yeah, it sounds a bit harsh,
Hey.
but it's not about criticism or anything.
Okay.
It's about understanding what's not correct
I see.
in the language you're learning.
So like knowing the mistakes to avoid.
Exactly. It's like those optical illusions.
Oh, yeah.
You only see one image until someone points out the other one.
And then you can't unsee it.
Exactly. Negative evidence is kind of like that.
Okay, so just being exposed to correct forms isn't enough.
It's not always enough. You need to know what doesn't work, too.
Fascinating.
Yeah.
So how did researchers figure this out?
Well, one study tried something interesting.
Okay.
They basically bombarded French-speaking students
Uh-huh.
with tons of examples of correct English adverb placement.
Like flooding them with good examples.
Exactly. They wanted to see if it would just click naturally.
So did it work?
It did help. They improved,
Okay.
but they still made mistakes,
Really?
especially errors that are common in French.
Oh, interesting.
Like their brains were holding on to those old patterns.
That makes sense. It's hard to break those habits.
It really is. Another study tried a different approach.
Okay.
They used visually enhanced text
Okay.
to highlight possessive determiners.
Like his and her.
Exactly. They made them really stand out visually,
So they were impossible to miss.
pretty much.
And did that work?
It helped.
Mm.
But again, it wasn't a magic solution.
Okay.
The students got better at using his and her, but they still weren't perfect.
So just noticing something isn't enough.
It seems like we need more active engagement.
So our brains crave more than just passive learning.
Exactly. And this leads us to processing instruction.
Processing instruction.
Yeah, instead of just presenting the language, researchers wanted to make people work to understand it.
So like more active problem solving.
Exactly. Like instead of just listening to a podcast,
Right.
you might try transcribing parts of it.
Oh, wow. That's way more challenging.
But it forces you to pay attention.
To the details.
Exactly, to the grammar, the structure, everything.
Did they find that this led to better results?
It seems that way.
That's really interesting.
Studies have shown that processing instruction
Mm-hmm.
can lead to better comprehension and production.
So you understand better and you can use the language better.
Exactly.
Wow, this is all so fascinating.
It really highlights how complex language learning is.
Right. There's no one-size-fits-all approach.
Exactly. But it's clear that comprehensible input is crucial.
Like those kids in the Canadian classroom.
Exactly. It builds that foundation.
But to really become fluent,
You need more.
right? Like focused practice and being okay with making mistakes.
And finding ways to actively engage with the language.
Even when it's tough.
Exactly. It's a journey.
It really is. And I think the most important thing is
What's that?
to figure out what works best for you.
Oh, absolutely.
Like pay attention to your own learning.
Find your strengths, your weaknesses.
That's right. And just enjoy the process.
It should be enjoyable.
Exactly. So to all our listeners out there,
Yeah.
keep exploring, keep experimenting.
And keep learning.
Thanks for diving in with us.
This was fun.
Until next time.